Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to dive headfirst into an incredibly dense, totally unhinged, 8,000-word stream of consciousness literary monologue. It's called The Comedian's Confession. And before we even get into the nitty-gritty, you really have to understand why this piece of writing is so legendary. I mean, it is a fascinating, exhausting, and just utterly mesmerizing deconstruction of the totally absurd mechanisms of human existence. The way this narrator just unwinds his own psyche up there on stage is absolutely captivating. So, let's jump right in.
Okay, picture this. Let's plunge directly into this incredibly jarring thought from our narrator. Our protagonist is a failing comedian, right? He's sweating profusely under the hot stage lights of this dingy provincial theater. He is essentially holding his audience hostage at this point, delivering this increasingly frantic monologue to a crowd that clearly, desperately doesn't want to be there. And right from the jump, he looks down at his microphone and calls it a dead bird. It's cold, it's silver, and in that moment he realizes it's just a completely empty vessel that he's desperately trying to breathe life into.
Section 1. The Unbroken Breath.
So the author actually subtitles this work, A Novel in One Unbroken Breath, and that's exactly how it feels. He delivers this entire monologue in a manic, time-jumping frenzy, without a single real break to catch his breath. At one point, the narrator describes his own memory by saying, chronology is a thick soup. You know, he dips his spoon in, and sometimes he pulls out the year 1987, sometimes 2004, and sometimes a totally dizzying mixture of both. It's a real trip. But this format brilliantly shows us, rather than just telling us, how his past traumas and his present, utterly failing performance are blending together into one suffocating existential crisis. He literally can't stop talking, because stopping means silence, and silence is the enemy.
Section 2. Monuments to Misdirected Energy.
Now, it turns out it's not just the comedian who is desperately trying to stave off the void. It's his entire family. They build what he calls monuments to misdirected energy. He starts mapping the bizarre anecdotes of his eccentric relatives perfectly to humanity's desperate need to impose some kind of order on a completely meaningless universe. We have Cousin Franz building miniature guillotines. We have an aunt who arranges porcelain frogs based on our own perceived sense of their spiritual authority facing the dawn. And we have a neighbor, Frau Ebner, who hoarded stolen hotel soaps chronologically, just to track the economic decline of Austrian tourism. I mean, it's hilarious, sure, but it's also a deeply sad collection of obsessions.
Take Cousin Franz, for example. Look at this number, 73. Franz spent 20 years obsessively building 73 miniature guillotines out of matchsticks. And here is the tragically absurd kicker about all this. They didn't even work. The little blades always stuck, but this obsession completely consumed him until he literally died at his workbench, aged 41, with a jeweler's loop still strapped to his eye. He completely transformed his entire existence into an endless, mechanical process just so he wouldn't ever have to sit in silence and ask himself why he was doing it.
And then there's his aunt. She spent 11 months in a hospital bed. Why? Well, because she fell down a rotting well in her own backyard. And while lying there for nearly a year with broken ribs and a shattered femur, she just stared up at a mural of clouds painted on the ceiling by some hospital volunteer. Lying there in pure agony, she concluded that heaven, if it even exists at all, is really just a static image painted by amateurs. It's nothing more than a decoration meant to distract you from your own inescapable physical suffering. Heavy stuff, right?
Section 3. Bureaucratic Astonishment.
So, what actually happens when these coping routines and mechanical habits run entirely on unthinking autopilot? What happens when the mechanism just takes over completely? Well, the comedian tells this shockingly dark, almost unbelievable story about a man named Herr Grunwald. Grunwald was a highly distracted taxidermist. He was so incredibly used to his daily routine of stuffing dead foxes out of pure muscle memory that one day, while worrying about his electric bill, he accidentally performed the entire initial taxidermy procedure on his own living cat, Bismarck. And when he finally snapped out of it and realized what he was doing, he didn't stop. He just finished the job.
When the cat was finally fitted with glass eyes, while somehow still breathing, mind you, the narrator describes its expression as one of bureaucratic astonishment. It was this horrifying realization that procedures and paperwork had finally triumphed over biology. This tragically absurd story serves as the ultimate metaphor for the comedian's thesis. Our routines are basically mechanisms that eventually blind us entirely to reality. The ultimate breakdown of the mechanism.
Section 4. The Prison of Performance.
As the engine of his stage performance really starts to cough and sputter, we pivot back to the comedian himself.
We start to examine how his complete inability to turn off his act has totally alienated him from reality. He is trapped in a prison of his own performance. The man has had exactly 2 failed marriages, and both were destroyed by his exhausting compulsion to convert his own lived experience into stand-up material. He cannot experience a single moment of genuine emotion without processing it, analyzing it, and trying to figure out how to twist it into a punchline.
His first wife, Petra, was a city planner. They treated their marriage like zoning compliance, a mutual taxidermy of emotion where everything was technically preserved but totally dead inside. But then, in stark contrast, his second wife, Anna, left him for a civil engineer. Why? Because the engineer, she said, just lived. He didn't need to constantly perform his existence for an audience. Being married to our narrator was essentially like being married to an engine that never, ever shut off.
The ultimate cost of all this alienation is revealed through his estranged daughter, Elizabeth. She delivers this devastating critique. She says, "You take other people's lives and turn them into jokes." She absolutely refuses to even invite him to her wedding because she knows, for a fact, he'll just cannibalize the sacred experience for his art. His performance is a prison that pushes away everyone he loves, protecting him from real intimacy but leaving him completely, devastatingly alone on that stage.
Section 5. The inescapable void.
After hours of sweating, pacing, and crying on stage, having alienated the few audience members who haven't already walked out the door, the comedian confronts a truly terrifying truth. There is no grand punchline to this confession. None. He is trapped in a horrific loop. Step 1, speak to fill the silence. Step 2, realize the words actually mean absolutely nothing. Step 3, continue speaking anyway. He knows the mechanism of his comedy is profoundly broken, yet he is compelled to keep talking because stopping means facing the silence, and silence means facing the void.
He directly confronts the crushing yet strangely liberating truth of meaninglessness. Pacing slowly back and forth, he asks, what if nothing means anything? What if the microphone is just a microphone and my monologue is just air vibrating? He exposes that his entire art form, his entire life's work really, is just a desperate distraction from the silence of mortality. It's a profound, exhausting unraveling of the human need to find a narrative in the chaotic mess of life.
As the comedian's voice finally shreds and the monologue slowly breaks down into pure duration, he poses one last question to his captive audience. And it's the question I want to leave you with today, drawn directly from his climax. Consider the fragility of the mechanisms we use to connect with one another. Is it possible to love someone and also be completely incapable of reaching them? Take a second and really think about that. Thank you so much for joining me on today's Explainer, and I'll see you next time.